Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another PC Boys podcast. I am your host, Logan Locke. So it has been a while, again, since I have done a podcast, but I do have a few announcements I need to make before we get started. And no, this is not about, subscribe to the channel and stuff like that. Linktree will be in the description as, per usual, with all the socials, Discord, and everything. But I am here to announce that PC Boys Uncensored is no longer going to continue. Simply put, I don't have the time to do 3 podcasts. I love talking about video games and movies, and I love talking about weather. So PC Boys Weather, which I just started, of course, is going to continue, as well as the main podcast. PC Boys Uncensored was a little fun thing I did on the side, talking about, politics and society and stuff like that, but it's just giving me too much anxiety that I don't need, and it's just one of those things I just don't have time to do anymore. Especially since I might be doing a Christian podcast soon for my local church. So it's going to not have much time be able to be put into it. I'll still keep the channel up, with prior videos and stuff, so you can see my evolution, I guess you could say, of content creation and my ideas changing and stuff like that. But I will not be posting any more new videos to PC Boys Uncensored. But I will be still posting, of course, PC Boys Weather, which is also on Rumble. So, storm chasing, talking about winter weather because we're getting to that season. Severe weather if it happens. And remember, mine's specifically geared towards New England, not outside of it. So, if you're outside of New England, I'm sorry, unless you just want to watch for entertainment, which, good for you guys. But today we are going to be not only reviewing Frank Stone, which it's interesting, I'm doing now 3 reviews in a row for the podcast, but we're going to be discussing theories and stuff like that from playing the game. So you have been warned, spoilers ahead, if you haven't played Frank Stone yet. So, the casting of Frank Stone is published by Behavior, the same people that, of course, have published the Dead by Daylight game, which this is in the world of, so it's a spin-off of the Dead by Daylight universe, as well as made by Supermassive Games, the development studio behind acclaimed games such as Until Dawn, The Quarry, and, of course, the Dark Pictures Anthology series, which is going to be having a new game come out next year. I believe it's called Directive 2082 or something like that. It's in space. I'm pretty excited for it. One of the very few anthology games I'm actually excited about. But this game was a big surprise. I actually heard about this game this year, even though it had been in development for quite a few years. And this game is not the normal Dark Pictures rule set, I guess you could say. So this game has, yes, choices that affect parts of the game, but this game is dealing with the Omniverse, which is the multiverse, as you would see it in Marvel or DC or any other media, and it plays out very interestingly. Basically, when you're playing through the game, you don't want to think of the past segments of the game, so the game is split up into 3 different timelines. You have the past, 1960s, the past 1980s, and the present 2024 timelines. However, you don't want to look at them as timelines. You do want to look at them as timelines, but alternate timelines, not time periods. That's what I meant to say. If you look at it in terms of a time period piece, you're going to get very lost very quickly when you start making decisions that don't make sense in the future. Because it doesn't matter if you get everybody killed in 1980, or if you let the baby get killed, which is in the demo, in the 1960s, it does not affect the 2024 characters. They are going to be there regardless of your decisions in the past, if you will. Past in quotations. It's just a different timeline, right? The whole game revolves around Augustine Lieber, or that's as she calls herself. That's probably not her real name, because that's how it's implied in the game, is that it's just one of many names she's used throughout all the different timelines. And her whole goal is to summon the entity to this world. Now, the interesting thing about this is in order to do this, she's collecting film, right? An old film, kind of like a fan film, I guess you could say, or a low-budget film, that is essentially called Murder Mill. And Murder Mill, specifically, certain versions of it have the essence of Frank Stone, who was the serial killer of this universe and of this game franchise. And he somehow is spiritually connected to some of these film reels, and she needs all these film reels to come back together so she can bring Frank Stone into the present day and prove it's himself worthy to the entity, and I guess she gets some kind of, reward in the end, which doesn't end up happening, but still. So this game gets very confusing in terms of reviewing it, because it's not your traditional story where it's like you have a beginning, middle, and end. You have 3 different time periods, but they're not like really connected to each other, because no matter what happens in each time period, it doesn't affect the other, because it could just simply be an alternate timeline with many different outcomes. And this point gets hammered home at a certain point in the game. You're playing as Linda, well, the adult future version of Linda. She's going through this archive of Murder Mill. Like, basically, Augustine Lieber has gone through so many different timelines and collected different versions of Murder Mill, and all of these different film versions or artifacts from those film versions, like Murder Mine t-shirts, which is an obviously slight difference to the Murder Mill t-shirts that were made, right? She collects all of these and puts these in a room. And this gives Linda the impression that, how is this possible? And then, the idea of the multiverse becomes very, big. There's also a part where you're playing as Jaime and you're in, like, the garage of the kids making the film in the 1980s, and there's even a book about the Omniverse, like Into the Omniverse, and it gives a little bit of an explanation about the Omniverse and how it works. But throughout this game, depending on your choices, depend upon how much you actually figure out about the plot and what's going on in the background. What we know about Augustine Lieber is she has been alive for centuries at this point, basically taking on new bodies to be able to continue to live, and different identities to pursue her goal of bringing the entity to our world, if you will. And there's 4 versions of Augustine in this game. One of them is based upon a theory, but it actually makes a lot of sense, and I'll get to that later. But the 3 main versions you see is one in a post-credits scene that is a young version of Augustine wearing slightly different clothes than the one where we see through most of this story. And she seems a little confused and disoriented when she gets taken out of the Holarium. I don't know what the fuck the actual terminology name of this device is, but basically it's able to pull Augustine and send her to different timelines and time periods. And then there's the old lady Augustine that we see throughout the game, who's like the shopkeeper and stuff in the 1980s, but she does make an appearance in the finale, bringing another version of herself to the present. So there is a lot of time travel in this game, or universe hopping, and it gets very confusing. And those are the 3 main versions of Augustine that we see. The 4th version of Augustine isn't even called Augustine, and it's not even really actually like, referenced that it's her. There's a character called Chris in this game. Chris is a kind of uncanny version, if you will, of Augustine. If you look at her, you're like, it kind of looks like her, but you're looking through like a warped mirror, right? And I think that's even referenced in the game. But it's like a warped mirror when you look at her and you're like, her and Augustine seem kind of familiar. But the interesting thing about Chris is she's technically an outsider to the town of Cedar Mills, or Cedar Hills, where the game takes place. And she has this obsession of making this horror film at the mill where Frank Stone either murdered or did not murder, depending on your choices in the 1960s portion of the game, a child. And his essence is buried in the mill, like it's stowed there, right? And that's what Augustine wants to reawaken. And so basically Sheriff Green, regardless of the timeline you're in, comes in, scares Linda, she drops the camera. And this leads them to going into town to getting a new camera. And they end up going to the shopkeeper, or the ancient shopkeeper, or whatever you want to, name her, old Augustine, and she gives them a magical camera that is able... and it's funny, depending on how much money you choose to take from... Bonnie, depends upon how much the actual camera costs. And I actually went through and played through this. It doesn't matter what version of the money, like if you take $10 from her or $20, it will be exactly the same amount that you choose to take from Bonnie. Which this plays into the whole role of like, oh, Augustine has been through all these timelines. Because in one timeline it could have been $20, in another timeline it could have been $10. And the whole goal was to get Chris to go to the mill with this camera and to have it be filmed there so that his essence could be released from his victims and the camera itself. And the whole goal was to have them capture Frank in the camera. Regardless of how many people die in the past timeline, he always gets caught in the camera. And those are the film strips she's trying to collect, because at the very end of the game, if you do have a survivor alive, they'll walk through the woods and you will see them, whoever the 3 survivors are, or the main survivors of the filming of Murder Mill, they will take apart and split the film into 3 segments. The 3 segments that end up in the Garnet Manor in the present day. And those 3 clips are needed to bring Frank Stone to the present day to complete the ritual and, like, you know, make him worthy of the entity and whatnot. And you get to see that. But like I said, maybe you don't get to see that if everybody dies, which is the canon ending of the game. Because when everybody dies, you get, first of all, the achievement that you completed the story. And also there are clues through many portions of this game about, many clues through the game about people are supposed to die. Like, for instance, on the main menu, it says die alone or die together, as, like, you know, do you want to play with people or do you want to play by yourself, right? But that do you want to die alone part is actually a hint towards what the ending of this game is supposed to be. On top of that, right, if you look at the filming of Murder Mill, it's not going to be called Murder Mill if there's no murders that take place, right? Furthermore, in the final mission, the finale of the Garnet Manor, it's called Massacre at the Manor. To have a massacre, many people must die. If people survive, there's no massacre. So the title of the game, you know, game modes that you can play, rather with friends or alone, is hinting towards everybody's supposed to die. Murder Mill is hinting at people supposed to die. The Massacre at the Garnet Manor, all of those, you know, Easter eggs, those little hints, those little nuggets are saying everybody's supposed to die. That's the canon ending of the game that they hint at, but maybe you didn't notice. So that's the first, like, major thing you notice about the story of this game. Second thing, as I mentioned earlier, how is Chris another version of Augustine? Well, outside of being obsessed with Frank Stone and filming this movie, and that's basically the only way to get Frank Stone to reappear, so doing that. She is the only other character that comes out of the hologram, whatever the machine is called, that transports between dimensions and stuff. Her and Augustine are the only 2 people that come in and out of that. Outside of maybe Sam. We don't know how Sam got there. We know, so the version of Sam in the 2024 timeline is not the version of Sam we play as in the past 2 timeline versions of Sam. And even Linda and Sam both acknowledge he's not the same Sam Green, and depending on what storyline you take, right? And choices depend upon, you know, how much of that you really actually fully come to understand, right? There are choices that will expand that lore further. The other major hint about the time travel aspect of the multiverse travel is green. Not Sam Green. The color green is very big and present. And actually, when I was making my nice maple tea downstairs before I did this podcast episode, I was like, wait a minute. Green, the color green, has a lot of influence in this game. The machine that transports people from the past to the present, like this, there's a green mist in the room. Augustine is wearing green clothing. When you look at the Murder Mill poster, it's green. Like, there's green in the background, right? Sam Green, who is also like this time traveler or multiversal traveler, his last name is Green. Yeah, maybe not the color green, but it's still green. Like, it still comes full circle. And when you look at Chris, her shirt's green. If you look at the alternate costumes for the game, she has a very vibrant, glimmery green top and bottom. Everything that revolves around those that actually are time traveling in this game is the color green. The amulet that the storekeeper, aka Old Augustine, can give Chris, depending on your choices of, you know, complaining about the price of the camera she gives you or not, turns green. So there's basically 3 endings, where if you choose first and foremost to keep Chris's character in the future instead of sending her back right off the bat, she can find an amulet or have this piece from the storekeeper. And when she tries to go into the past, or another version of the past, because she would basically end up meeting an alternate version of herself, Jaime, and Linda filming the original part of the movie before they break the camera and stuff, right? Or the reason why she breaks the camera would be because she went into that universe. But if you are holding the necklace, or you are holding the amulet given to you by the shopkeeper, right, and she tries to go through, she will die. And when you look, because it zooms in on the amulet, it zooms in on that pendant or whatever that the shopkeeper gives them, right? It's green. And even for going in and out, right, when Frank Stone is coming out of the when he's coming out of the projector screen, it's green. When she tries to go back in, it's green. Like I said, the color green plays a huge role in everything in this game. Like, the green aspect is wild. How much it actually plays into the story, from names to the visual interpretations. Now, of course, red obviously plays a big role in everything. When you're talking about a killer and blood and the entity and how the universe is red. But ultimately, though, everything in this game is revolved around that color green. It has a significance to it. To what degree, I'm not exactly sure. I haven't gotten all the endings. And I haven't gotten, I have to play through this game many times, guys, before I, 100% know everything, have every secret unlocked and whatnot. But when you just look at how everything plays out, right? It's crazy how the color green plays into the time travel and multiversal traveling. And I just thought I would point that out, because there might be people that watch this, I doubt it, but there might be somebody that watches this and is like, holy crap, I'm a big, person that's also looking into the casting of Frank Stone. And the color green has a significant role in the entire story. And I just thought I would bring that up, because it's very, very important. Super important, matter of fact. So, another big, thing that they show you in this game is, Jaime, right? Like, how Jaime is, this big deal, because if you let the baby die in the beginning of the game, you find out it's Jaime that died, and you're like, but wait a minute, Jaime is alive in this time. So like I said, if you're not somebody, I guess, that's keeping up with the idea that this is multiverse, or that they're hinting at the idea, there is literal things that are, if you're not into the whole concept, it gets fleshed out, oh, we got many different versions and alternate timelines. So they really are driving that point home. I don't really think Jaime dying in the past really has a big impact in terms of the future telling of the game. But like I said, there's so many different ways that this can end. But I think the ending that's the most interesting about this game is if you can send Chris back to meet her alternate self, filming the original part of Cedar Mill. It's interesting because she could stop the entity from recasting Frank Stone, in a way. Because she's not technically going back in time, she's going to an alternate universe. And that's the crazy thing. So, when you think about time in this game, it's kind of crazy. So, think about it like you have a timeline, right? Okay, let's say this is the 2024 part of the timeline. At the exact same time, the 1980s version of events are playing out. So whatever you are doing in the present, when you get to the screening room and you're watching the film of Murder Mill, whatever decisions you are currently making in the 1980s timeline will play out in continuity with the 2024 characters viewing it. So if you, let's say, got Linda killed, and old Linda is watching, the film, she's like, well, that's impossible. I'm standing right here. There's so many aspects of that, right? So many. Regardless, though, if you choose to kill everybody, have a few survivors, or whatever the ending is that you get in this game, you will end up at the campfire from the DVD menu, and right before the game ends and it cuts to black, you hear the starting sound of a game of Dead by Daylight, the same sound cue. The entire game builds up to the beginning of a Dead by Daylight lobby and start of a match. It's actually very genius. And I actually knew when I was doing the live stream of the game, I don't know if you can watch it anymore because they delete VODs on Twitch after a certain amount of time. But when I first played through the game, it was like when we were in the woods and we were looking at like them taking apart the Frank Stone camera and splitting the film reels, I was like, oh my fuck, we're actually going to be at the campfire. That's where we're going. Like, it clicked in my head where we were, what we were headed towards. Because we're in the Dead by Daylight universe. Where the fuck else are we going to go? To the fire. The entities already consumed the world, or a portion. It makes sense. And like I said, I will have to go through this game many, many more times before I figure out what's going on. 100%. But one thing I can say for certain about this game is that there is a lot here to break down, okay? So I know that this is a review. It's not exactly, I guess you could say, a normal review where I'm like, oh, the characters are good, the plot's good. I have to explain a lot of this in depth to you guys because the concepts in this game they're big. The multiverse, the way that the story plays out. Like, I'm not saying all of this stuff just because I want to draw out the runtime of this podcast. It's simply because this game is not a simple, like, oh yeah, this is the characters, this is the story, this is the end, boom, done. Even there are other games, right? Other Supermassive games where you have many different endings. There is still, like, a canon ending, and even though you have a bunch of different endings, it doesn't really matter. Like, you get to choose your own ending. Okay, cool. Right? This is the ending I got. This is how the characters were along that path that I took. This game, because it incorporates the multiverse, it's more than just multiple endings. There is a canon ending, but every version of the game that you have is canon. There is a specific ending the game is supposed to have, okay? That's why you have the achievement. And why there's a, hints dropped that, like, everybody's supposed to die. But technically, everything you do in the game is canon in the multiverse of events that could take place with this game. Like, the past segments of the game are all canon. But the ending of the game is supposed to be a certain ending, if that makes sense, right? The events of how Murder Mill plays out and how the film is made and who dies during the past timelines, it doesn't matter. All of those are canon. All of those are many different versions of the film created through the multiverse or the omniverse. But the ending is supposed to have everybody die. So the ending is kind of set in stone as to what is supposed to happen, but the 1980s portion of the game, anything is canon that happens, whatever path you take. I know it's very confusing, but that's how it is. So let's break down the characters, okay? I'm going to be honest with you guys, I only cared about, like, 2 characters in this entire game. Linda, okay? By far the best written character in the game. And Sam Green. Linda and Sam Green, outside of Augustine, or / Chris, really those are the only characters with importance. Augustine is just kind of a, a bitchy, snooty, person. She's like, I'm British, and I'm just gonna, be very vague, and I'm gonna bring Frank Stone, my killer, to now, even though, I'm gonna get sacrificed to the entity because she gets betrayed. She gets sacrificed to the entity. Even though there's, like, so basically Augustine Prime, that's what I'll call her, the old lady, the shopkeeper, that's Augustine Prime. That's the mastermind of all this. She planned on the Augustine that got sacrificed at the end of this game. That was planned. She was no longer useful to old Augustine, so she killed her. It's kind of the same thing with Chris. Chris was supposed to be the new body for old Augustine. She was supposed to get trapped in there, not be let out, so when the old version of her comes to the future, she can take over that body. And the reason she was teleported through that portal is because now that she had awakened Frank Stone's essence and he was basically reborn, if you will, she was no longer useful to Augustine Prime's plan, old lady Augustine. So she's like, I'm taking your body, I'm snatching you from this timeline, I'm putting you and trapping you in the hologram, and when I come back through, I'm going to envelop your body, I'm going to take over your body. But at the same time, it didn't work. Why? Because, of course, Maddie ended up opening the hologram, and she, ended up getting out and stuff like that, or getting sent back. So staying in the future or being sent back. But regardless, right, she is no longer needed. Like, her purpose has been played. It's been done. And so Augustine Prime will basically snatch versions of herself throughout the multiverse to either, basically have a new body, a younger body, to continue living for a millennium, or will use a younger version of herself to do her dirty work in her grand scheme. So basically, Old Lady Augustine, the shopkeeper, is the mastermind of everything going on in this game. And the younger version of Augustine is just a pawn being played by the older Augustine. Like I said, it's a mindfuck, guys, to try to understand what's going on here because of so many concepts, but it's wild. So, for creativity and just for world building alone of the Dead by Daylight universe and multiverse, this game gets a 10 out of 10 for that. Character-wise, only a few of them I like. So we'll give them a 6 on character development and characters in and of itself. Because like I said, only Augustine, Chris, Linda, and Sam Green, those are the only 4 characters that matter. They're really the only 4 that get the most development, that have the most crucial elements to the story. Everybody else is just kind of there to be cannon fodder or to flesh the story out a little bit, but in and of themselves are not really strong characters. Like Bonnie is a brooding punk girl. Not really much done with her. She doesn't travel through time. There isn't a significance to her. Linda in the past and Linda in the future, while they are not the same person, they both play a crucial role in the story of the game, right? Setting the events in motion, coming to the realization that, for old Linda, that she's in the multiverse. For young Linda, she is the filmer of the movie, gives her own input and stuff like that. Like she does have an important role. I would say older Linda has more of an important role than younger Linda, but they're both still as important. I just consider them both as one. Jaime, outside of being killed or not killed in whatever timeline it is and affecting the newspaper article, he doesn't really have a major purpose in this story. Sam Green's son, yet again, not really a major purpose in the game outside of having guilt, or you find out he has cancer depending on what dialogue choices and stuff you make. There's a lot of factors, but like I said, a lot of these characters don't have anything. Stan is an annoying rich prick who has a man bun, right? He's not a major character to the story. He's literally designed to die. I've tried to save Stan, even though I don't like his character deliberately, he will die. You can't save Stan. He's meant to die. He's a character designed for you to hate him and have him die. You can have him die sooner or later, but he's meant to die. At the end, they're all meant to die at the end of the day, but Stan really, there's no way to save him. And same thing with Bonnie. I think Bonnie is also destined to die as well. Which is kind of interesting. How that all works, some of their fates are just completely sealed and there's nothing you can do about it. But like I said, there are only a few characters in this that matter. Maddie's character, in my opinion, don't really think she actually matters to the story. You could kill her, you could keep her alive, it doesn't matter. We know that her version of her mom died differently. At least officially, at least how she was saying it, she died of a disease, not being hooked like she was in the movie. Yeah. It's all fucked up. the storylines are very hard to keep up with. But like I said, character-wise, we'll give them a 6. We'll give them a 6 on the characters. But yeah, creativity, building the world out of Dead by Daylight, the Omniverse and stuff, 10 out of 10 on that. Characters, about a 6. Only a few really have crucial matters to the story. The timeline branching, or the choice branching, in my opinion, it's more effective in this game than it is in other games, and let me explain why. In other games, you can have different endings, and that's cool, right? You get to build your own story, but in this game, most of your choices are canon, because it's in the realm of the multiverse, and it can either hinder or help you understand the story more, depending on your choices. And the more endings you unlock and more paths you take through replays, the more the story makes sense. So there's a lot of replayability with it. And I think that it adds to the reason to replay the game. The multiverse. Everything you do is a different universe, a different outcome, more or less understanding to the story. Now, the major critique of this game. It's not really that scary, okay? When I buy a horror game, I'm expected to shit my pants. Or at the very least, get my adrenaline pumping. This game did not do that for me. This game made me excited, the lore building. I was like, oh my gosh, I love reading the lore and figuring out more about the Omniverse and the entity and how Augustine's plan's working. This game got me excited into the lore, but it didn't scare me at all. I'm playing this game, and I'm Dead by Daylight scares me more than this game. And I don't get scared when I play Dead by Daylight. But yeah, you get the anxiety when, the killer's chasing you and you're trying to, dodge them, throw pallets down, jump through windows in just the right nick of time. It's anxiety-inducing. It's fun. It's exhilarating. This game doesn't really have that. If you're getting this game for horror, you're gonna hate the game. If you're getting this game because you're a Dead by Daylight fan, you'll love this game. And if you're especially a Dead by Daylight lore fan of the Omniverse, you will fucking love this game. But it really depends. It really depends upon what you're trying to buy this game for. I love DBD. I love the, lore. Dude, I'll be honest with you guys. The lore of anything I'm in love with. Call of Duty Zombies lore. Complicated. Love the shit out of it. Doom lore. Very extensive these days, especially with the new games. Love it, right? Marvel. All of the different universes and continuities, right? Love it. I don't really know much about things like Warhammer and stuff like that, but I could probably get into the lore of those without having to play the game. Werewolf the Apocalypse, some of the, World of Darkness stuff, Vampire the Masquerade, love the lore and stuff with all the different, clans and factions and how each, species has their own governments and their own, civil disputes and stuff like that. It's all interesting to me, right? I'm a Christian, right? Reading the Bible is literally a giant lore book of the truth and of the Lord. I know not everybody's going to agree with that, but, for me, right, I'm reading lore. It doesn't matter if it's fictional lore from a video game franchise, a movie franchise, or the Bible. I'm getting invested into knowledge of real or fiction, right? And I love that. I love reading into that stuff. So I loved this game in every form. But the game is not scary. And if that's what you're looking for, this game is not for you. I normally give games a 9 out of 10, or not 9 out of 10, but something out of 10. This game, for me personally, I would give it a 8 out of 10. But, like I said, it's not scary. If this game was scary, could have gotten a 9 out of 10 for sure, but it wasn't scary. And if you're, like I said, if you're not a DBD fan, if you're not a lore fan, if you're of DBD, if you're not somebody that is into these kind of branching story games, it's not for you. Because if you're coming here for a genuine horror experience, I would suggest Outlast Trials. It's a multiplayer game, but it's scarier than this is, and more disturbing. Tell you that. And the Outlast Trials, in my opinion, the story and lore of that game is interesting as well. As fucked up as it is, and yeah, it's really fucked up. There's a lot of lore there, but it's scarier. This game isn't scary to me. Maybe for some people this game will be scary. Maybe some people are just oh, I don't want to see a creepy killer in a mask. To me, it wasn't scary. I would say for most people, this game wasn't scary. I think some of the other games that they've done was scarier than this. I would say the Quarry isn't scary, but it had scarier moments in this game, and I think that Until Dawn for sure had scarier moments in this game. This game was just very intriguing and interesting lore-wise, and the entity and all this stuff. This game really tapped into that. What's going on? There's a bigger story at play here than just a normal straightforward narrative. Even though these games have branching choices and endings, this game's dealing with the multiverse. Everything is kind of canon here. It's a loose canon, if you will. So, there's a lot to learn and a lot of things to pick up on through replays. And yeah, same thing for other Dark Picture games, but it's different. Because with those games, you choose your own canon ending. And when you go through, yeah, you learn lore, but it's not multiverse scale kind of thing. It's hard to explain. But like I said, I love this game. I love this game a lot. But yeah, you guys will have to let me know what you guys think about the game, some of your theories on the game if you played through it, and if you're mad at me for spoiling a lot of the game and the plot points, guys, I told you in the beginning, spoilers ahead. That's on you at this point, right? But yeah, so I hope you all enjoyed the podcast. Tomorrow we have the Venom, 3 final trailer. I might do a podcast on it. I may not do a podcast on it. I will eventually. Or it'll be touched on in a podcast at some point, but we'll see. I guess it depends on what does the trailer include. If the trailer includes a lot of big things, let's say we see Null, or we see a bunch of different symbiotes like Agony, Phage. We already know about Lasher and Scream, but if we get to see some other big things, maybe some Spider-Man tease stuff, I'll talk about it. But outside of that, I don't know if I'll be podcasting or not tomorrow. I also want to make a note. I haven't been putting my podcast on audio. I apologize for that. I'll just be honest with you guys. I've just been lazy on that part of being like, okay, I'm going to make this audio too. But then again, I get most of my views that I get on this podcast now is on YouTube. Audio, I might get a few. I might get 1 or 3 plays. So it's a lot of extra work for a few plays. I mean, yeah, it gets more mass distributed than YouTube, but, you know. But I'll make sure to get this one up at least on Spotify and stuff like that, because I haven't done Spotify in a hot minute. Like, the past, like, fucking probably half a year, I haven't put anything new on Spotify. They've been on YouTube, but not on Spotify. But, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully got you, thinking about some things that maybe you didn't if you played through the game before. And, yeah, I will catch you on the next one. Maybe we'll talk about the Venom trailer. Maybe not. Depends on what happens tomorrow. But thank you all for watching, and God bless.